Hello and welcome back. How's the family? Do you know what? We haven't got time to discuss everyone's personal situation. We have got so much to discuss in today's video that we need to hit the ground running on this. This is the Aoostar WTR Max. And after a whole week, 8 AM till 5 PM, every single day hammering this system, I'm going to tell you right now, this might be the perfect NAS. Short of a few little stumbles along the way that we're going to talk about later on, this thing has left me gobsmacked in what it is offering, the price tag it's arriving at, and its sheer capabilities. We've seen NAS evolve. This is where, to me, all of the perfect bits have met. So let's talk about it. The WTR Max is 6 SATA bays of storage combined with 4 M.2 NVMe's, Gen 4 I might add, delivered via a 7th tray. By the way, we're going to talk about how slick that goes in. It has also got 2 10 GBEs, 2 2.5 GBE. It has got USB 4. It has got OCuLink. It has got 10 gig USB. It has got USB Type-C. It has got another M.2 NVMe on the base. It has got an SD card slot there. It has got a customizable LCD front panel. It has got jam on it as far as I'm concerned. This thing is a blinder. But you didn't come to this video for me to read a spec sheet at you. Let's talk about the specifics. Right now, the price tag for this varies. It arrives at the moment for $599. Now, that $599 price tag doesn't involve an SSD, doesn't involve your RAM. But if you scale it up to $899, you can get a 1TB SSD and 32 gig of DDR5 non-ECC memory. But it does support ECC, and for another $899 instead of getting the SSD, you can choose for $899 to get this and 32 gig of ECC memory there. Now, again, not the smallest price tag, but when you look at the hardware you are getting, again, all of that storage alongside an 8-core 16-thread AMD Ryzen CPU inside, and again, ECC support, it really does scale out its capabilities and its muscles. So first up, let's talk about design. It is metal all the way around. It's got a metal surrounding chassis there. The trays themselves are click and load, no screwdriver required. You may notice as well, I've got Synology hard drives inside. You're going to see those a lot throughout the course of this video because frankly, I was starting to run out of media and I thought I would use those drives inside. So keep our eye open for that later in the video. But I'll say right now, all of these trays are slick as hell. Again, we talked about it earlier, but that little bay there at the end, they're not the first people to do an injection slot method there for the M.2 board. Again, ZimmerCube, I believe, were the first to do that, but they do it so much slicker. It's spring loaded. Again, it's a lovely bit of design. And also, have you noticed there? All of the SSDs I put inside, and I've had to remove this one at the end, we'll come to that later as well when we go to the VMs, they've all got heat sinks. There is enough room here for our heat sinks there. It's tons of room that you managed to put into what seems to be a comparatively compact chassis. Now, discussing about that chassis again, the base panel here has a fan there that's resting on top of the 5th M.2 NVMe slot there, a Gen 4 x 2 slot, alongside 2 SODIMM DDR5 slots there. Now, if we go back to the front, the ventilation goes all the way through. On the bottom side, we have ventilation there. That is where our motherboard sits on top of a copper fan. And then at the back, we have got the rear mounted fans there, and that back panel there can be completely accessed. It is a clean access panel there inside there. Hopefully on screen you can see the video. 2 thumb screws, remove it, boom, you've got full access. And that fan pushes air all the way over the SATA drives, but crucially on top of those 4 M.2 NVMe's, and they are Gen 4, remember that. Now, the LCD panel, I will say, is the one area where there was just a blip for me. When I turned the device on, it had the Aoostar logo there, and there is software that you can download from their website that allows you to customize that panel quite significantly. Now, I will touch on number one. That software, all the browsers I tried to download it were flagging it for me. In some cases, it wouldn't let me download it. It's coming from a Chinese source. Sometimes they've re-uploaded it to a few other websites, and if you download it directly from their own, I was able to download it successfully. But because it's currently not completely finished verification for Microsoft's own store, when I was trying to download it, I encountered all kinds of problems. So do be aware of that. The other thing, when you want to configure that panel, you have to use the client tool because the client tool accesses very specific specific IP, I believe it was 172 or 127 off the top of my head, to configure that panel. And I was having a nightmare with my network setup here trying to configure that. So I'm not saying I don't think it works, but I was having difficulty doing it my side, because when I was trying to patch into that very specific IP, it would have required me to change 3 whole layers of my network setup in order to do that. So again, hopefully if there is recorded footage of it working, or I've spoke to the brand to supply some of that, or spoke to a couple of other YouTubers talking, testing this right now, hopefully that's on screen. But the thing that blows me away is just how compact this is for how much storage is inside there. To put it into perspective, you would think with 6 drives, 5 M.2 NVMe's, 2 rear fans, an internal fan and an external fan, so one on top of the CPU and one at the base as well, with technically 4 fans on the go, you'd think this thing will be louder than God. Well, when I had the fan set to automatic, and that was with the system running several tests across different media inside the system, it hit around 35 to 38 dBA. Now, when I went into shell and started pushing the fans to go to maximum while simultaneously running some tests on the hard drives, the audio level went from 43 to about 44 dBA. Now, what does that mean? Well, in the grand scheme of things, those are actually surprisingly low numbers for the amount of storage we are talking here. Now, I'm going to stop rabbiting. Here's how they sound. But these further positive impressions were extended further when I was talking about temperatures. Again, for a metal chassis with all of that kind of hardware bundled inside, and particularly with 2 SFP 10 gig NICs on the rear, I expected this thing to fry eggs. And I was weirdly surprised, a little under the read from my notes. After 1 hour of 10 GBE repeat testing, it hit 47 to 49 degrees thermals when I was panning around the whole system. After 24 hours, and that was the system being intermittently accessed on a schedule every hour, it was sat out the next day at 35 to 40 degrees. Again, respectable. A lot of the cooling systems there doing their job. Finally, when I sat the device upright, after that 24-hour period, I wanted to see how much of the heat had collected at the base there underneath the system, and that was sat around 40 to 42 degrees. Because remember, there are 2 fans on the base of this system and 2 on the rear, and plenty of vent room at the front. I was really impressed by the noise and the temperature management of this system. Next up, let's talk about the bloody storage, because let's face it, it's good to know you can't fry an egg on this, but we also want to know how much data it can store. Obviously, standard hard drive going up to about 24, 26 TB right now, you've got a ton to play with. With the M.2s there, you can store 4 TB M.2s in each of them and have yourself a wonderful time. Now, the SATA ones, they are fed into an ASM 1166 SATA controller inside on a Gen 3 x2 lane. That means it's got 2 gigabytes per second to play with in terms of bandwidth. So more than enough there if you do happen to use SATA SSDs to feed out onto those 2 10 gig NICs there on the rear. The M.2 NVMe's are sat on 2 of these being Gen 4 x2 and 2 of these being Gen 4 x1. So that means 4 gigabytes per second and 2 gigabytes per second respectively there. And the M.2 NVMe for your OS drive based in the base panel, that is also a Gen 4 x2 lane CPU there, PCIe lane equipped SSD bay there. So a huge amount of bandwidth to play with. Now, I will be doing a follow-up video where I'm pretty much going to strip this thing down, because I want to know if this is U.2 or U.3, but moreover, I want to find out more about the arrangement of PCIe inside. And even though I had this for a great deal of time, I didn't want any of my deep dive and tear apart to undermine its general testing throughout the course of this. But until I find out more about that, I wanted to find out more about the individual performances of these SSDs and just how much of that performance is realized in this system. Now, the Gen 4 x1 lane M.2 NVMe slots, they achieved 1.6 over 1.5 read over write when I was accessing it in Unraid doing a repeated 1 gigabyte file test. The Gen 4 x2 lane M.2 NVMe's achieved 2.9 over 2.8 read write respectively with the same 1 GB repeated test there. So lovely numbers and great to see inside the system. However, when I was trying to transfer data between each of the individual M.2s, whether I was using the 4x1 and sending it to 4x2 or 4x2 to 4x2 or 4x1 to 4x1, I never really saw more than about 500 to 600 megabytes per second, which to me indicated that there may perhaps be a bottleneck internally that I haven't had an opportunity to fully explore. I will say that that isn't too much of an issue for me personally, because as long as it is it's consistent, which it was, it's not the end of the world, because remember, I was sending data between SSDs within the system, not outputting. And later on, when you see the output performance on iPerf, you'll see that externally, none of that was any kind of bottleneck there. But before we move on, and staying on the subject of storage, it's worth keeping in mind, this thing has an OCuLink port, and alongside, depending on your OS of choice, the ability to take advantage of external PCIe and therefore external graphics cards, or even external PCIe into network adapters, because this has no internal PCIe upgrade slot, it's worth highlighting they do also have an M.2 NVMe expansion device that takes advantage of OCuLink and Thunderbolt 4 and allowed me to add even more storage to this system throughout the course of my testing. Again, I know most users are going to err towards external PCIe for that OCuLink port there, because expandability and keeping this compact, they've gone with the OCuLink rather than giving you traditional PCIe, which is going to be mixed reaction. But I just wanted to give a shout out to that expansion device there, because OCuLink allows for not just M.2 NVMe expansions, but larger storage expansions. So even though this is compact with a huge amount of storage in day one, scalability is also possible too. Now currently this is only available in one CPU configuration. It's an AMD CPU, the AMD 8845 Pro Ryzen CPU there. It's an 8-core 16-thread CPU with a TDP at 35, 45 and 54 low, auto and high respectively there. It's also got 20 lanes of Gen 4 to play with there, and a clock speed at 3.8 that can be burst up to 5.1 when needed. It also has integrated Radeon graphics. It's a 780M, and that integrated graphics can be burst up to 2.8 gigahertz when needed. So virtualization, containers, running a Proxmox server, something we did, Plex multimedia. This thing has got a lot of oomph under the bonnet to play with there. Also, as mentioned in the intro, it supports ECC memory. The device I've got here doesn't have ECC. The unit I received doesn't have ECC, but it does support ECC. I went into the memory configuration via SSH to confirm that. But this is a 24/7 NAS. What about power consumption? It already arrives with a beefy 280 watt external PSU, which I know some users aren't in love with external PSU, so keep that in mind. But what about the power consumption there? Well, I did 4 different tests, which hopefully you can see on screen. Number 1, I set the device up with no SSD or hard drive media there. I just had the base OS SSD and no 10 gig inside. And it was pretty low indeed. It went to 18 watts, in fact, base with no storage media inside. Now, when I installed the device with SSDs only, so that was 5 SSDs inside, but no 10 gig connection, it went up to 24 watts at idle. Now, when we went to the active tests, I had the device populate with full hard drive and SSD media, but no 10 gig slot, to no 10 gig SFP, and it hit 52 to 53 watts. And finally, when I had all the multimedia base populated, all of the drives being accessed, and CPU at 40 to 50%, and 2 10 gig NICs active at that time, it went to 73 to 89 watts. It's very variable because of the level of stuff I was doing. Now, I'm not suggesting 73 to 89 watts isn't a low number. It's a very high number, but it's not going to be that 24/7, and that was with this system utilizing all storage media, 2 SFP 10 gig NICs, and that CPU, as mentioned, at 40 to 50%. Once you factor all of that in, that number makes a lot more sense, and the fact that it can come down quite easily, for me, left me impressed by those numbers. Just keep in mind that is not a 24/7 number I'm talking about. That is peak, and most NAS devices spend 23 out of 24 hours a day doing nothing. Finally, when it came to what I was actually doing with this device, frankly, and I've already taken to Reddit with this, I found it very difficult to test this in ways that people wanted, simply because there's just so many things you could do with it. If you wanted to look at this for Plex, for example, I ran a 400 megabit 4K file transcode alongside a 200 megabit 4K transcode alongside an 8K 80 megabit 4K transcode alongside another 80 megabit 8K native playback, and the CPU only went to 45% in Plex Media Server. Those are 4 enormous files happening at once, and with transcoding happening with integrated graphics taking the load, with hardware transcoding, I might add, I was really impressed with those numbers. When it came to taking the thing to virtual machine deployment there, I installed Proxmox on this device, and then from there I ran 6 Windows 10 VMs alongside 2 Ubuntu VMs. I think it was 21 or 22 LTS. And again, the RAM I dedicated 4 vCores, 4 gig to the Windows VMs, 2 gig to the Ubuntu VMs, and I think it was 2 vCPUs to every one of those VMs. Ran like a charm, absolutely fine. And again, finding the way people want to see this tested is half the battle, because this is such a multi-purpose device that there's going to be different utilizations, and just people listening to me rabbiting on about this, they've probably got 100 different deployments they've got in mind. Short of this business with the LCD not being anywhere near as smooth as I'd like, and wanting to investigate further into the PCIe arrangement internally, I am bowled over by this device. Hell, we went in with iPerf, full saturation across them, as you would expect, but also when I went in with traditional CrystalDisk and AJA, we saw numbers of 16 to 1800 thanks to those SSDs inside. So clearly the run through to the 10 GBEs was still fine as well. Ultimately for me, this is phenomenal craftsmanship in the world of NAS. It's not for everyone, it is expensive, it is a beefy piece of kit. But in the DIY NAS space, to choose your own OS of choice, this thing is incredible. And it's one of the very, very few NASes that I have seen that can challenge that N5 Pro from Minis Forum that's just bubbling around there on the horizon. And you better believe we're going to be comparing those two later this year. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. This thing has left me impressed, and I have not done testing it quite yet. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. There should be a link to the written review below. There are links to where you can get hold of it. They're not affiliated. Frankly, we're not making a penny out of those currently. But frankly, I don't care, because this thing left me so impressed. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.